Hello everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
I cried in a Target parking lot. Picture this, a Tuesday afternoon, California sun blazing through the windshield, and you're sitting in the driver's seat of a dusty Honda CR-V. Tears streaming down your face while your 3-year-old daughter hums Baby Shark in the back. That was me, 2 years ago. And the reason I was crying, my toddler had just corrected my English in front of a cashier, a store manager, and an elderly woman buying cat food. Not because I said something wrong, because I said sheep when I meant ship. The cashier's face went through 5 emotions into seconds. The old lady chuckled, and my daughter, my sweet little Lily, who still wore diapers at the time, looked up at me with those huge brown eyes and said, very clearly, "Mommy, it's not sheep, it's ship. You said the animal, say ship." I wanted the earth to open up and swallow me whole. But here's the thing that still haunts me and also saves me every single day. That little girl wasn't being mean. She wasn't mocking me. She was teaching me. And I was too embarrassed to see it. So I paid for my groceries, walked to the car, buckled her in, and then I just sat there, forehead against the steering wheel, crying like someone had died. What had died, actually, was my pride. The pride of a woman who used to be a university graduate back in Vietnam, who had taught literature, who could quote poems from memory. And now I couldn't even say the word ship without sounding like I was talking about a fluffy farm animal. That moment in the Target parking lot wasn't the beginning of my English journey. It was the bottom. The absolute rock bottom of my confidence as an immigrant mom, a wife to an American husband, and a human being trying to raise a bilingual child in the United States. And I want you to understand something before we go any further. If you are watching this video right now because you're struggling with English, because you feel stupid every time you open your mouth, because you think you're too old or too slow or too far gone, you are exactly where I was. And I need you to know that what happened next changed everything. Not because I found a magic app or a perfect teacher, but because I finally did something that felt terrifying at first. I listened to my toddler. I really listened, not to her words, but to her method. You see, children don't learn language the way adults do. Adults study grammar tables. Adults memorize vocabulary lists. Adults worry about making mistakes in front of other adults. Toddlers, they just try. They say good, and when someone corrects them, they don't burst into tears or feel ashamed. They say when the next time, and if that's wrong too, they try again. No drama. No self-hatred. Just repetition. Just play. Just the absolute refusal to let fear stop them from communicating. And my daughter, at 3 years old, was already a master at this. She didn't know she was mastering anything. She was just living. But I watched her. And I started to see the secret that no English teacher had ever told me. The secret isn't grammar. The secret isn't accent. The secret is shame. Shame is the killer. Shame is what makes a grown woman cry in a Target parking lot over a mispronounced word. Shame is what keeps you silent at parent-teacher conferences, at work meetings, at dinner parties with your American friends. Shame is what makes you say "I'm fine" when you really want to say "actually, I'm lonely and I miss my home, and I don't understand half of what you just said." And the most beautiful, ironic, hilarious truth that I've learned from being corrected by a preschooler is this. My daughter has never felt shame in her entire life. Not once. When she says I run instead of I ran, and I gently say ran, sweetie, she just nods and repeats ran and moves on. No internal monologue about how stupid she is. No replaying the mistake in her head at 3 a.m. She just learns. And that, my friend, is why a child can be your best teacher. Not because they know more English than you, but because they haven't yet learned the one thing that destroys adult language learners, the fear of being wrong. So I want you to imagine, for a moment, that you can learn English like a toddler, that every time you made a mistake, you didn't flinch, that every time someone corrected you, you just said, oh, okay, and kept talking. How fast would you improve? How much lighter would you feel? That's what this video series is about. Not grammar drills, not perfect pronunciation, but a story, my story, about a woman who was so ashamed of her English that she couldn't even order coffee, and how her own 3-year-old daughter became the best teacher she never knew she needed. In the next sections, I'm going to tell you about the first time Lily corrected my grammar in public, the day I almost gave up and went back to Vietnam, the fight with my husband that actually healed our marriage, and the single sentence my daughter said to me last week that made me realize I'm no longer afraid. But for now, I want you to sit with this one question. What would happen if, just for today, you decided not to feel ashamed of your English? What if you said the wrong word and just laughed? What if you treated your mistakes like a toddler treats a falling block? Pick it up, try again, no big deal. That shift in mindset, I promise you, is worth more than 1,000 vocabulary apps, because I've tried them all, and none of them worked until I started watching my daughter. So here's your first small step right now. While you're watching this video, take a deep breath and forgive yourself for every mistake you've ever made in English. Really. Say it out loud if you're alone. I forgive myself. Because that toddler-sized secret. It starts with letting go. And I promise, by the time you finish this series, you'll never look at a child the same way again, especially if that child is yours. Now, are you ready to hear what happened the first time my daughter corrected my past tense in front of my husband's entire family? Let's just say there was turkey, there was stuffing, and there was a very, very awkward silence. My toddler said, Mom, it's not good. Let me take you back to a Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks after the Target parking lot incident, because apparently the universe decided I hadn't suffered enough embarrassment yet. My husband Tom, who is American, white, born in Ohio, and speaks English the way whales swim in water, had invited his parents over for dinner. His mother, Susan, is a retired school teacher. His father, Bill, is a former Marine who never raises his voice, but somehow still scares me when he chews. And there I was, stirring a pot of pho in my kitchen, feeling proud of myself because I had just mastered a full sentence in English without stuttering. The sentence was, I go to the store today to buy the meat. I said it to Tom while his parents were sitting at the kitchen island, drinking iced tea. Tom didn't correct me. He never corrects me because he's too nice, and also because he says my English is charming. But my daughter Lily, who was 3 years and 4 months old at the time, was sitting on the floor with her crayons, drawing what I think was supposed to be a cat. She looked up. She put down her purple crayon, and she said, with the calm confidence of a Supreme Court judge, "Mommy, it's not good. It's went. You say I went to the store, not good. That's not a word." Silence. The kind of silence that happens right before a balloon pops. Susan stopped chewing her iced tea. Bill looked at Lily, then at me, then at Tom. Tom started coughing like he was trying to cover a laugh. And I just stood there, holding a ladle dripping with broth, and felt my face go from beige to red to purple in about 4 seconds. My 3-year-old had just corrected my grammar in front of my in-laws. Not just any grammar. Past tense. The most basic, kindergarten-level past tense. And she was right. Goad is not a word. I knew it wasn't a word. I had known it since high school. But in that moment, when I was trying to speak quickly, trying to impress my mother-in-law with my fluency, my brain had reached for the easiest verb form, just at Ed, and my mouth had betrayed me. The worst part, Lily wasn't being mean. She wasn't trying to humiliate me. She was genuinely helping, the way she would later help me find my car keys or remind me to turn off the stove. She looked at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Mommy, say went." Like I went. Can you say it? And my mother-in-law, God bless her, finally broke the tension by saying, "She's a better teacher than I ever was." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But inside I was screaming. Because here's the thing that nobody tells you about learning English as an adult immigrant, especially a mother. Your children will outpace you. Not eventually, not after college. They will outpace you before they can tie their own shoes. And that is a special kind of humiliation that no amount of you should be proud can fix. After dinner, when Lily was asleep and Tom's parents had gone home, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and cried again. Tom knocked on the door and asked if I was okay. I said yes, but I wasn't. I was thinking about how, back in Vietnam, I used to be the smart one. I was the daughter who won the English-speaking contest in high school on paper, with written answers, where nobody could hear my accent. I was the one who translated movie subtitles for my friends. I was the one who dreamed of coming to America. And now here I was, in America, being taught past tense verbs by a child who couldn't even reach the kitchen counter. But something shifted that night. After the crying stopped, I started thinking about Lily's method. She didn't shame me. She didn't roll her eyes or sigh or say, "How many times have I told you?" She just stated the correction, gave me the right word, and asked me to repeat it. That was it. No judgment. No disappointment. Just a simple, clean exchange of information. And I realized, lying there in the dark, that every time I felt embarrassed by her corrections, it wasn't because she was cruel. It was because I was carrying something heavy that she wasn't. I was carrying 10 years of worrying about what people think. I was carrying the memory of every time someone laughed at my accent. I was carrying the belief that making a mistake means you're stupid. Lily wasn't carrying any of that. She just heard a wrong word and offered the right one. Like handing me a napkin when I spill something. No big deal. So I made a decision that night. I decided that the next time Lily corrected me, I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't hide in the bathroom. I would say thank you and repeat the word, just like she does when I correct her Vietnamese. And you know what? It worked. Not right away, because habits are stubborn. The first few times, I still felt that hot flush of shame. But after a while, something strange happened. I started to look forward to her corrections, because every correction was a tiny gift. It was a free lesson from a native speaker who loved me, who wasn't charging me $60 an hour, who wasn't judging me for being old or slow or foreign. She was just helping. And that, my friend, is the second secret that no English teacher ever told me. The best corrections are the ones given without emotion. Children do this naturally. Adults, unfortunately, add layers of meaning. You made a mistake means you're not good enough, that aren't actually there. So here's what I want you to try, starting today. Find someone who can correct your English without making you feel bad, a child. If you have one, a patient friend, even a language exchange partner who agrees to correct you like a toddler. No sighing, no eye rolling, just oh, you said X, but it's Y, try again. Then practice receiving that correction the way a toddler does. Say okay and move on. Do not apologize. Do not explain why you made the mistake. Do not spiral into self-hatred. Just take the word, thank them, and keep talking. I promise you, this one shift will do more for your fluency than any grammar workbook. Because the real barrier to speaking English isn't your vocabulary size or your accent. It's your fear of hearing that's wrong from someone else's mouth. The moment you stop fearing correction, you start speaking freely. And the moment you start speaking freely, you start improving. That's what Lily taught me. And next, I'm going to tell you about the day I almost quit English forever. The day I packed my bags and told Tom I wanted to go back to Vietnam. And what my toddler said that stopped me. The day I wanted to quit English forever. You know that feeling when you've had just enough embarrassment to fill a lifetime. And then the universe decides to add one more spoonful just to see if you'll break. That was me, 6 months after the goat incident. Sitting on my bedroom floor at 2 in the morning with a half-packed suitcase and a plane ticket open on my phone. I was ready to go back to Vietnam. Not because I didn't love Tom, not because I didn't love Lily, but because I had just spent 4 hours at a parent-teacher conference, the first one of Lily's preschool, and I had understood approximately 40% of what the teacher said. The rest was a blur of words that flew past me like birds I couldn't catch. The teacher, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Patterson, had used phrases like social-emotional benchmarks and fine motor skill development and peer scaffolding. And I had sat there nodding and smiling like a bobblehead while my brain desperately tried to translate. Tom was beside me, holding my hand, occasionally squeezing it to signal it's okay. But it wasn't okay, because when Mrs. Patterson turned to me and asked, "So what do you think about Lily's progress in language acquisition?" I froze. I knew every word in that sentence separately. Progress, language, acquisition. But together, in that order, with her expecting a thoughtful answer. My mind went completely blank. I opened my mouth and said, "She, good, Lily, talk good." Mrs. Patterson blinked. Tom jumped in and saved me as he always did. But on the drive home, I didn't say a single word. That night, after Lily was asleep, I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back against the tub. And asked myself a question I had been avoiding for 2 years. Why are you still here? Not in America. I meant here, as in this life where I was supposed to be a mother, a wife, a functional adult, but I couldn't even answer a simple question about my own child's development. I thought about my sister back in Ho Chi Minh City, who had a nice job, a nice apartment, and never had to worry about anyone laughing at her English because everyone spoke Vietnamese. I thought about my mother, who called me every week and asked, "Are you happy?" And I always said yes, even though I wasn't sure anymore. And then I thought about Lily, about how she would grow up speaking perfect English, how she would eventually realize that her mother sounded like a foreigner, how she might feel embarrassed to bring friends over. I had seen that happen to other immigrant families. The kids who translated for their parents at banks and hospitals, rolling their eyes because mom still said he go instead of he goes. I didn't want to be that mom, so I decided to quit. Not quit living in America. I loved Tom, and I loved our life in California, but quit trying to speak English well. I decided I would just speak Vietnamese at home, let Tom handle all the English conversations, and accept that I would always be the quiet one at parties. It felt like relief, honestly. Like taking off a pair of shoes that had been pinching for years. I stopped trying to improve. I stopped watching English videos. I stopped asking Lily to correct me. For 2 whole weeks, I only spoke Vietnamese to her. She looked confused at first, but she adapted quickly. Kids are like that. And then, one afternoon, she did something that shattered my plan into a million pieces. We were sitting on the couch, reading a picture book about a duck who couldn't swim. The duck kept falling into the water and getting back up. Lily pointed at the duck and said, in English, "Mommy, the duck is not scared. He tries again." I looked at her. She looked at me. And then she said slowly, as if she were the parent and I were the child, "Mommy, you are like the duck. You try again too." I started crying right there on the couch. Not sad crying. The other kind. The kind where something inside you cracks open and all the pressure comes rushing out. Because here was this 3-year-old, this tiny person who didn't know anything about verb tenses or parent-teacher conferences or the fear of sounding stupid. And she had just diagnosed my problem more accurately than any therapist could. I wasn't bad at English. I was scared of falling. And the duck in the book, the duck who couldn't swim but kept trying, that duck wasn't embarrassed. That duck didn't quit because it fell 100 times. It just kept getting back up because falling was how it learned. I pulled Lily onto my lap and held her so tight she said, "Mommy, too much squeeze." And in that moment, I made a new promise. Not to become fluent. Not to sound like a native speaker. Just to try again. One more time. Every time. Like the duck. Like my daughter. Like every toddler who has ever fallen down while learning to walk and simply stood back up because the alternative, staying on the ground, was not an option. So I want you to hear this, especially if you are thinking about giving up on your English journey right now. You are not stupid. You are not too old. You are not a failure. You are a duck who is learning to swim, and every mistake is just a fall into the water. The water doesn't hurt you. The shame hurts you. The belief that you should already be better, that hurts you, but your toddler, your inner child, the part of you that learned to walk by falling 1,000 times, that part knows the truth. The truth is that you only fail when you stop trying, not when you say goat instead of went, not when you mispronounce ship as sheep, not when you freeze at a parent-teacher conference. You fail when you decide that the fall means you shouldn't get up. And the beautiful, messy, hilarious secret that I learned from a picture book about a duck is this: getting back up is not heroic. It's just what living things do. Leaves get blown off trees and keep photosynthesizing. Ants get stepped on and keep marching. Toddlers fall and keep running. The only creature that stays down after a fall is the one that has decided that the opinion of other creatures matters more than its own movement. Don't be that creature. Be the duck. Be Lily. Be the woman who cried in a Target parking lot and then went home and tried again. Because trying again, I promise you, is the only skill that actually matters. And in the next section, I'm going to tell you about the surprising way love helped me practice English without even realizing I was practicing, and how my American husband's patience and occasional confusion turned our marriage into the best language lab I never signed up for. Love in broken sentences. You know what's worse than a toddler correcting your grammar in front of strangers? Trying to flirt in a language you barely control with a man you really, really like, while your brain desperately searches for words that haven't arrived yet. That was me, 7 years ago, before Lily was even a thought, before Tom was my husband, before I had any idea that my broken English would somehow become the foundation of a marriage. I met Tom at a coffee shop in downtown San Diego. I was working as a cashier at a small Vietnamese bakery, and he came in every morning for a croissant and a black coffee. For 2 weeks, our entire conversation was me saying $3 and him saying thank you and me smiling like an idiot because I didn't know how to say anything else. Then one day, he stayed. He sat at the counter, ate his croissant slowly, and asked me, "So where are you from?" for words. Simple words, and I panicked because I knew how to answer that question in a textbook. I am from Vietnam. But I also wanted to say more. I wanted to say, I come from Ho Chi Minh City, which used to be called Saigon, and I miss the street food there, especially the noodles with beef. That sentence existed in my head, perfectly formed in Vietnamese. In English, all I could manage was, I from Vietnam, food good there. Tom didn't laugh. He nodded and said, I've heard the food is amazing. What's your favorite dish? And suddenly, we were having a conversation. A slow, clumsy, wonderful conversation where I used the wrong prepositions and forgot half my verbs and said cow meat instead of beef, but he understood me. Every time, not because my English was good, because he was patient, because he listened with his whole face, not just his ears. Because when I said I want eat noodle instead of I want to eat noodles, he didn't correct me. He just smiled and said, let's go get noodles sometime. That was the moment I fell in love with him. Not because he was handsome or kind or because he bought me coffee, because he made me feel like my broken sentences were enough. And that is the most powerful gift one human can give another who is learning a new language. The quiet, steady assurance that you are worth listening to, even when your grammar is a disaster. Our first real date was a disaster too, but in the best possible way. We went to a Thai restaurant, and I tried to tell him a story about my childhood dog. The dog's name was Bingo. I wanted to say, Bingo was very old and he couldn't see well anymore. What came out was, Bingo old, no see, sad. Tom put down his fork and looked at me with such tenderness that I almost cried. He said, "That sounds really sad. Tell me more." So I tried again. Bingo, my friend, long time. Then he, go away. I meant he died, but I couldn't say that word. It felt too heavy, too final. So I just sat there, frustrated, because I had all these feelings and memories, and I couldn't give them to him in the language he understood. And Tom reached across the table, took my hand and said, "You don't have to have perfect English for me to understand you. I already understand." That night, I went home and wrote in my journal, "Today I said 20 things wrong." And he still looked at me like I was smart. That journal entry is still in my drawer, and I read it sometimes when I feel stupid about my English. Because love, real love, doesn't care about your past tense. Love cares about your heart. And my heart, even in broken English, was loud enough for Tom to hear. Now, here's the part that surprised me. After we got married and Lily was born, my English improved, not because I studied harder, but because I stopped being afraid of Tom. I knew he wouldn't judge me. I knew he would wait while I searched for words. I knew he would rather hear my slow, messy sentences than sit in silence. And that safety, that emotional safety, is something that most language learners never get. They go to classes where teachers correct every mistake. They talk to strangers who look away when they struggle. They practice with apps that beep when they're wrong. But they don't have someone who looks at them the way Tom looked at me in that Thai restaurant. Like every word I said was a gift. Even the wrong ones. So here's what I learned from falling in love in a second language. Perfection is not the goal. Connection is the goal. When you speak English, your real objective is not to sound like a sea in an anchor. Your real objective is to be understood and to understand someone else. That's it. That's the whole point of language. And if you can achieve that with broken sentences, with wrong verb tenses, with an accent that screams, "I'm not from here," then you have already succeeded. The rest is just decoration. I remember asking Tom once, years later, why he never corrected my English when we were dating. He said, "Because I wasn't trying to teach you. I was trying to love you. And you were already perfect at that." I cried again. I cry a lot in this story, in case you haven't noticed. But that cry was different. That cry was relief, because for the first time in my life, I realized that my English didn't have to be beautiful. It just had to be brave. And being brave means opening your mouth even when you're scared. It means saying, "I want to eat noodle," and not apologizing. It means letting someone hear your accent, your mistakes, your pauses, and trusting that they will still want to stay. That is what love taught me about language. And that is what I want to teach you in this video. You don't need perfect English to find love, to keep love, to build a family, to raise a child who will correct your grammar and still hug you at the end of the day. You just need enough courage to keep talking. Because somewhere out there, or maybe already in your house, there is someone who doesn't need your sentences to be flawless. They just need you to try. In the next section, I'm going to tell you about the silent dinners with my own family, the ones where I sat at the table understanding everything and saying nothing, and how that silence almost broke us before Lily's tiny voice taught me to speak up. The silent dinner with my own family. Picture the strangest thing that can happen inside a house full of people who love each other. Absolute silence at the dinner table. Not the comfortable silence of a couple who's been married for 50 years and doesn't need words. The heavy, suffocating silence of someone who understands every word being said but cannot find the words to say anything back. That was our dinner table for nearly 2 years after Lily was born. Tom would sit at one end, Lily in her high chair, and me at the other end. And Tom would talk. He would talk about his day at work, about the new project his team was working on, about something funny that happened at the grocery store. Lily would babble in her baby language, occasionally saying mama or daughter, and I would sit there, spoon in hand, nodding, smiling, saying mm and oh really, and that's nice. Because the things I wanted to say, the real things, the complicated things, the opinions and jokes and memories, those were trapped behind a wall of missing vocabulary. I knew what I wanted to express in Vietnamese, but in English, the words came out slow, simple, and childish. So I chose silence instead. It was easier, safer. No one would laugh at my accent if I didn't open my mouth. No one would correct my grammar if I just nodded. But here's what nobody tells you about choosing silence. It doesn't just hide your mistakes. It also hides you, the real you. The funny you, the opinionated you, the you that has thoughts about politics and movies and whether the chicken is a little dry tonight. After a while, I started to feel invisible at my own dinner table. Tom would ask Lily, "How was your day, sweetheart?" And Lily would point at her peas. Then Tom would look at me and say, "How was your day, honey?" And I would say, "Good." One word. Always one word. Because if I said more, I might say it wrong. And saying it wrong felt worse than saying nothing at all. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. About 6 months after Lily started preschool, Tom had a bad day at work. His boss had criticized his presentation, his computer crashed, and he spilled coffee on his shirt. He came home frustrated, and at dinner, he started venting. He talked about how his boss was unfair, how the project was behind schedule, how he felt like he was failing. And I wanted so badly to comfort him. In Vietnamese, I would have said something like, "Em hai wo and hang rect APLCC. And LA Nguyen mean ma bit. Chun ta say king vif quachu yun nei." That sentence is warm, loving, specific. In English, all I could manage was, "I'm sorry. You okay?" Tom looked at me, not angry, just tired. He said, "Yeah, I'm fine," and went back to eating. But I saw something in his eyes that night that I hadn't seen before. Loneliness. He was lonely at the dinner table with his wife sitting right across from him. Because the person he married, the woman who used to make him laugh in Vietnamese, who used to debate with him about everything, who had a sharp tongue and a quick wit, that woman had been replaced by a nodding, smiling ghost who only knew how to say good and okay and I'm sorry. That night, after Tom fell asleep, I lay awake for hours. I thought about all the dinners we had eaten in silence. I thought about all the conversations I had avoided. I thought about how my fear of speaking English was slowly starving our marriage of the thing that made it alive. Real communication. Not just exchanging information about who picked up the dry cleaning, but sharing feelings, fears, dreams, complaints, jokes, sarcasm, the whole messy spectrum of human connection. I was giving Tom a diet version of myself, and he deserved the full meal. The next morning, I did something terrifying. I sat Tom down at the kitchen table before Lily woke up, and I said, in my slow, broken English, Tom, I need to say something. It will take me a long time, and I will make mistakes. But please, listen. He nodded, looking worried, and then I talked. For 15 minutes, I told him that I felt invisible, that I hated saying only good when he asked about my day, that I had opinions about his boss too. I thought his boss was a jerk, but I didn't know how to say jerk in a way that sounded natural, that I missed the old me, the Vietnamese me, the one who could make jokes so fast that people would choke on their rice, and I cried. Of course I cried, but Tom didn't laugh. He didn't correct my grammar. He didn't say it's opinions about not opinions of, although I later learned that I had said it wrong. He just listened. And when I finished, he reached across the table, took both my hands and said, I didn't know you felt this way. I thought you were just quiet. I thought you didn't have anything to say. But you have so much to say, and I want to hear all of it. Even if it takes you 10 minutes to say one sentence. Even if every word is wrong, I want to hear you. That conversation changed everything. Not because my English suddenly got better, but because Tom and I made a new rule for our dinner table. No more silence. I would try to speak, even if it was slow and wrong, and he would listen without finishing my sentences, without checking his phone, without that tiny frown that said hurry up. Some nights, I only managed 2 or 3 sentences. Some nights, I gave up halfway through and switched to Vietnamese. And Tom would just nod and say, I don't understand the words, but I understand the feeling. And slowly, over many dinners, the silence filled up with my voice, croaky, hesitant, imperfect, but mine. I started telling him about my day, not just saying good. I started complaining about the neighbor's dog. I started telling stupid jokes that only half worked because I used the wrong punchline. And one night, Lily, who was 4 by then, looked at me and said, Mommy, you talk a lot now. Tom burst out laughing, and I did too. Because she was right. I had gone from silent to chatty, not because my English was perfect, because I had finally understood that my family didn't need perfect English. They just needed me, the real me, the one who uses the wrong preposition and says I feel instead of I felt but still has something worth hearing. In the next section, I'll tell you about the first time Lily had to call the doctor for me because I couldn't, and how that humiliating moment became one of the greatest gifts of my life. When my 4-year-old called the doctor. Here's a scene that still makes my stomach clench when I remember it. Me, lying on the couch with a fever of 102, unable to speak without coughing, and my 4-year-old daughter holding my phone to her ear, talking to a nurse at the pediatrician's office. I had the flu. A bad one. The kind where your bones hurt and your brain feels like it's wrapped in cotton. Tom was out of town for work, and I was home alone with Lily. I needed to make a doctor's appointment, not for her, for me, but every time I tried to speak on the phone, my voice cracked and the words came out wrong, and the receptionist kept saying, "I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?" After 3 failed attempts, I threw the phone on the couch and started crying, not because of the fever, because I had lived in America for 6 years, and I still couldn't make a simple phone call without sounding like a robot that was malfunctioning. Lily walked over, picked up the phone, and said, "Mommy, I can do it. What do you need?" And before I could stop her, she had dialed the number. I listened, half delirious, as my 4-year-old, my tiny, still dash wears dash pull dash ups dash at dash night 4-year-old, said to the nurse, "Hello. My mommy is sick. She has a fever and she cannot talk good. She needs to see the doctor. Can she come today?" There was a pause. Then Lily said, "Her name is Mommy." "No, I mean her real name is My M.I. She was born in Vietnam. Her birthday is May 12th. She is this many." I could imagine her holding up her fingers, 34. The nurse must have asked something else, because Lily nodded and said, "Yes, she has insurance. My daddy has the card, but he is at work. Can we still come?" Another pause. Then Lily's face lit up. "Okay. Thank you, bye." She hung up, turned to me, and said, "Mommy, we go at 3 o'clock. I wrote it down. She had written 3 on her arm with a purple marker. That was the moment I realized my daughter was not just correcting my English anymore. She was speaking for me. She was translating my adult life into language that other Americans could understand. And I felt 2 things at once: overwhelming gratitude and a shame so deep it felt like drowning. Because no mother wants to need her 4-year-old to make phone calls for her. No mother wants to be the one who can't handle her own business, can't advocate for herself, can't speak well enough to ask for help when she's sick. I had become the parent who needed parenting, and Lily, sweet Lily, had stepped up without hesitation. But here's what I want you to understand about that day. After the shame faded, after I got my medicine and slept for 14 hours and woke up feeling human again, I started thinking about what had actually happened. Lily had done something that I, in my feverish panic, could not do. She had called a stranger, explained a problem, answered questions, and gotten a result. All in English. All without fear. All in the same language that made me freeze up and stutter. And I realized something that changed my entire approach to learning English. My daughter wasn't born with a special language gene. She had just never learned to be afraid of the phone. Think about that for a second. When a toddler speaks on the phone, they don't worry about accents. They don't worry about the right preposition. They don't replay the conversation afterward. cringing at every mistake. They just say what they need to say, and if they say it wrong, they try again, or the person on the other end figures it out. That's it. That's the whole secret. No magic. No special talent. Just the absence of fear. So I asked myself, what would happen if I approached phone calls like a 4-year-old? If I dialed the number and said my mommy is sick, well, in my case, I am sick, and just let the words come out, messy and wrong and imperfect, without apologizing. What if I stopped rehearsing every sentence in my head 5 times before speaking? What if I trusted that the person on the other end wanted to understand me, not judge me? The next week, when I had to call the pharmacy to refill my prescription, I almost didn't do it. My hand hovered over the phone for a full minute. But then I thought of Lily, of how she had just picked up the phone and called without a second thought, of how she hadn't worried about saying cannot talk good instead of cannot speak well. So I called, and I said, "Hi, I need refill. My medicine." The pharmacist said, "Okay. What's your name and date of birth?" I told her. She said, "Got it. It'll be ready in an hour." That was it. 2 minutes, no disaster, no humiliation. I had spoken imperfect English on the phone, and the world had not ended. In fact, the pharmacist hadn't even blinked. I called Tom after that, crying happy tears, and said, "I did it. I called the pharmacy," and he said, "Of course you did. You've always been able to do this. You just didn't believe it." He was right. The ability was already there. My fear was the only thing in the way. So here's what I want you to try, especially if you avoid phone calls or conversations with strangers because you're scared of your English. Think of a 4-year-old. Think of Lily picking up my phone and saying my mommy is sick without worrying if is sick was the most elegant phrasing. Then do that. Do exactly that. Call somewhere low stakes, a store, a restaurant, a customer service line, and say what you need to say in the simplest, most direct way possible. Don't rehearse. Don't apologize for your accent. Don't say sorry for my bad English before you even start. Just speak. Like a child would. Like Lily did. Because here's the truth. That took me 6 years and a fever of 100 to learn. Most people do not care about your grammar. They care about understanding you. And they can understand you even if your sentences are broken, even if your accent is thick, even if you say refill my medicine instead of refill my prescription. The only person who demands perfection from you is you. The rest of the world is too busy with their own lives to notice your mistakes. And the ones who do notice, the ones who smirk or correct you or make you feel small, those people are not your teachers. They are not your audience. They are just noise. Ignore them. Call the pharmacy anyway. Order the coffee anyway. Ask for directions anyway. Because every time you speak, even if it's wrong, you are building a muscle. And that muscle, the muscle of speaking despite fear, is the only thing that will ever make you fluent. In the next section, I'll tell you about the shame that almost broke me completely. The day I realized Lily's English was better than mine, and how I turned that shame into my greatest motivation. The shame that almost broke me. Let me tell you about the lowest moment of my entire life in America, lower than the Target parking lot, Lower than the silent dinners. Lower than the 4-year-old making phone calls for me. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, no different from any other Thursday, except that Lily had just turned 5 and had learned to read. Not just sight words like cat and dog. She could read full sentences, picture books, cereal boxes. And on that particular Thursday, she was sitting on the living room floor with a Dr. Seuss book, reading aloud to herself while I folded laundry. I was listening, half smiling, proud of my little girl, and then she hit a word she didn't know. She stopped, looked at it, and sounded it out. FMOUS. Famous. Famous. Then she looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, what does famous mean?" And I froze. Not because I didn't know the word. I knew famous. In Vietnamese, it's nai ting. I had known that word for 20 years. But in that moment, my brain did something terrible. It tried to translate the definition from Vietnamese to English, and the words got tangled, and I opened my mouth and said, "Famous mean when many people know you, like, you are big in TV." Lily looked at me, tilted her head, and said, "That's not what famous means, Mommy. It means when a lot of people know your name because you did something good." She had just corrected my definition of a word that she had learned 5 seconds earlier, a word she had never seen before, a word she had sounded out phonetically and then understood faster than I could explain it. I folded a towel, put it in the basket, folded another towel, and then I walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the wall. I didn't cry this time. Crying would have been a release. I felt something worse. Emptiness. A hollow, cold recognition that my 5-year-old daughter had surpassed me, not just in pronunciation, not just in grammar, in vocabulary, in comprehension, in the ability to take an unfamiliar word, decode it, and use it correctly within seconds. While I, her mother, the adult, the one who had studied English for 12 years in school, couldn't even define famous without sounding like a second grader, I sat there for 20 minutes, running through a mental list of everything I had done wrong. I should have studied harder before moving here. I should have taken classes instead of working at the bakery. I should have made American friends instead of staying in the Vietnamese community. I should have practiced more, tried harder, cared more. The shame was not a wave. It was a blanket. Heavy, thick, smothering. And underneath it, I heard a voice, my own voice, whispering, "You are a failure. You are the mother who gets taught by her child. You are the one who will never be enough." That night, after Lily went to sleep, I told Tom I wanted to take a break from speaking English at home. Only Vietnamese. For 3 months, Tom looked at me for a long time and then said, "Okay, if that's what you need." But his eyes were sad, because he knew what I was really saying. I'm giving up. For 3 months, I spoke only Vietnamese to Lily and Tom. Tom tried to learn a few phrases. Bless his heart, Lily, who had grown up bilingual, switched easily between languages. But something strange happened during those 3 months. I didn't get better at English. I got worse. Because I wasn't practicing, I was hiding. And hiding, I learned, is like putting a broken leg in a cast and never taking it off. The leg doesn't heal. It atrophies. My English atrophied. By the end of the third month, I could barely order coffee without stumbling. The shame had not gone away. It had grown. It had fed on my silence. One night, I was tucking Lily into bed, and she said something that cracked me open. She said, in Vietnamese, "Em con Luke emu noi ting an," which means, "Mommy, I miss when you spoke English." I said, "Why, I spoke badly." And she said, in English, "Nay, you didn't. You spoke like you." And she was teaching me the lesson I had been running from for 3 months, that my English, even the broken version, even the version that couldn't define famous correctly, was mine. And it had value, not because it was perfect, because it was me. I crawled into bed next to Tom that night and said, "I'm ready to try again." He hugged me and said, "You never stopped trying. You just needed to rest." And he was right. The shame had not broken me, it had exhausted me. But exhaustion is not defeat. Exhaustion is just your body saying, "Stop carrying this weight." And the weight I had been carrying was the belief that my English had to be as good as a native speaker's to be worthy. That belief was a lie. And Lily, in her 5-year-old wisdom, had just called me on it. So here's what I want you to know, especially if you have ever felt ashamed of your English compared to a child, a coworker, a neighbor, anyone. Shame is not a teacher. Shame is a thief. It steals your courage, your voice, your willingness to try. And the only way to defeat shame is to speak anyway. To say famous mean many people know you even though it's not perfect. To let your child correct you and then say thank you instead of running to the bathroom. To accept that your English will always have an accent, always have holes, always be a little bit broken, and to love it anyway. Because it is the language of your life in this country. The day after Lily said she missed my English, I called my sister in Vietnam. I told her the whole story, the Target parking lot, the good incident, the silent dinners, the phone call, the shame blanket. And my sister said something that made me laugh so hard I cried. She said, "You know, back home, everyone thinks you're so brave for moving to America. And here you are, crying because a 5-year-old knows more words than you, my. Do you realize how funny that is?" She was right. It was funny, tragic and funny and human. I had been treating my English like a wound when it was actually a work in progress. A messy, beautiful, imperfect work in progress. Just like me, just like every immigrant who has ever stumbled over a word and gotten back up. In the next section, I'm going to tell you exactly how I rewired my brain, not with apps or classes, but by watching my daughter and copying her like the world's oldest, slowest, most determined toddler. A toddler's secret to learning fast. After 3 months of hiding in Vietnamese, after the shame blanket and the bathroom floor, and the 5-year-old who missed my English, I finally did something I should have done from the very beginning. I stopped trying to learn English like an adult and started learning it like a toddler. Not by studying, not by memorizing, by watching. Really watching. I spent a week doing nothing but observing Lily, how she talked, how she listened, how she made mistakes, and fixed them without a single flinch. And what I saw changed everything I thought I knew about language learning. Here's the first thing I noticed. Lily doesn't learn words. She absorbs them. There's a difference. When I tried to learn a new word, I wrote it down, repeated it 10 times, made flashcards, tested myself. When Lily learns a new word, she hears it once in a cartoon, repeats it under her breath while playing with blocks, and then uses it in a sentence 3 days later correctly without ever having studied it. How? Because her brain isn't filtering everything through a translator. My brain, the adult brain, hears an English word and immediately tries to match it to a Vietnamese word. It's like I'm building a bridge between 2 languages, and every new word has to be carried across that bridge on foot. Slow, heavy, exhausting. Lily's brain doesn't have a bridge. She has 2 rivers running side by side, English in one, Vietnamese in the other. She doesn't translate. She just knows. I watched her one afternoon while she was playing with her toy kitchen. She picked up a plastic apple and said to herself, "I'm going to cut this apple into slices." Then she switched to Vietnamese and said, "Con sag tao thin ming." Back to English. "Mommy, do you want a slice?" Back to Vietnamese. Mu and Tao Keng, no pause, no translation, no how do you say this, just fluid, effortless switching. I asked her, "Lily, how do you know when to speak English and when to speak Vietnamese?" She looked at me like I had asked the dumbest question in the world. "Because," she said, "you speak Vietnamese. Daddy speaks English. So I speak both." That was it. No grammar rules, no vocabulary lists, just exposure and need. She learned English because she needed it to talk to her dad, to her teachers, to her friends. She learned Vietnamese because she needed it to talk to me. And she never once worried about making a mistake, because mistakes were just part of the process of being understood. So I decided to copy her, not her vocabulary, her method. Here's what I did differently starting that week. First, I stopped translating in my head. Every time I caught myself thinking, "How do you say this in English?" I forced myself to just say something, anything, even if it was wrong. Because toddlers don't wait for the perfect word. They say that thing you put on your feet when they don't know the word socks. And people understand them, so I started doing that too. At the grocery store, I couldn't remember the word avocado. So I said to the employee, "Excuse me, where is the green fruit that is soft and you make guacamole?" She laughed and pointed. I got my avocado. No shame, no panic. Second, I started repeating everything I heard, the way Lily repeats words from cartoons. Not studying, just echoing. I would watch a TV show and repeat sentences out loud, copying the intonation, the rhythm, the emotion, not caring if I sounded stupid. Because Lily sounds stupid sometimes too. She says I run and sheeps and tooth are white, and then she corrects herself later. The point isn't to be right the first time. The point is to practice. Third, I stopped asking, "Is this correct?" and started asking, "Do you understand me?" That shift changed everything, because correct is about rules, understand is about connection. And connection, I finally realized, is the entire point of language. If Tom understands me when I say, "I want to eat noodle," then the sentence has succeeded. The missing T is just decoration. I started testing this everywhere. At Starbucks, I stopped rehearsing my order. I just walked up and said, "I want coffee with milk and sugar." Not I would like a latte with 2% milk and 1 raw sugar. Just simple, direct, toddler-level English. And guess what? They understood. Every time. Because coffee orders are not grammar exams. They are humans helping other humans get caffeine. The fourth thing I did was the hardest. I started making mistakes on purpose. Not big ones, small ones. Just to practice not caring. I would say I go to the park to Tom, knowing it was wrong, and then wait for his reaction. He would say went, and I would say right. Went, and we would move on. No spiral, no crying in the bathroom, just correction and continuation. After a week of this, something miraculous happened. My brain started to relax. The constant pressure to be perfect, the pressure that had made me freeze up at parent-teacher conferences and cry in parking lots, it started to dissolve, because I had finally understood what Lily had known since she was 2. Mistakes are not evidence of failure. Mistakes are evidence of trying, and trying is the only way to learn. I want you to imagine what would happen if you gave yourself the same permission. If you stopped treating every conversation like a test. If you let yourself sound like a toddler sometimes, simple, direct, imperfect, and trusted that people would still understand you. Would you speak more? Would you freeze less? Would you finally start to enjoy English instead of fearing it? I know the answer, because I lived it. The moment I stopped trying to sound like an American and started trying to sound like myself, even if that self spoke in broken sentences and wrong tenses, my English improved faster than it had in years, because improvement doesn't come from avoiding mistakes. It comes from making 1,000 mistakes and learning from each one, and toddlers, my friends, are the world champions of making mistakes. That's their secret. That's Lily's secret. They don't learn fast because they're young. They learn fast because they're not afraid to fall. In the next section, I'll show you the science behind why the adult brain fights us so hard, and how I rewired my 30-year-old brain to learn like a child again. Rewiring my 30-year-old brain? You know what's ironic about being a grown-up who's trying to learn a new language? Your brain, the same brain that has kept you alive through tax returns and job interviews and emergency room visits, suddenly becomes your worst enemy. It doesn't want you to learn English. It wants you to stay safe. And safe to an adult brain means doing only what you already know how to do perfectly. That's not me being dramatic. That's neuroscience. After my toddler-inspired experiment in sounding stupid on purpose, I got curious about why learning English as an adult felt so much harder than it did when I was a child learning Vietnamese. So I did what any desperate language learner would do. I fell into an internet rabbit hole of research papers, YouTube videos by polyglots, and articles about brain plasticity. And what I found blew my mind. Here's the simple version, because I know you're not here for a lecture. A child's brain is like wet cement. It's soft, moldable, ready to absorb whatever shape you pour into it. Every new word, every new sound, every new grammar pattern sinks in easily because the brain hasn't decided yet what's important and what's not. But an adult's brain, our brains are dry cement, hard, fixed. They've already built highways for our native language, Vietnamese for me, probably your native language for you, and those highways are wide. smooth, and incredibly fast. When you try to learn a new language, your brain doesn't want to build new roads. It wants to shove the new language onto the old highways. That's why you translate in your head. That's why you say I goed instead of I went. Because your brain is applying the rules of your first language to English. It's not being lazy. It's being efficient, or so it thinks. But here's the problem with efficiency. When you rely on translation, you will always be slow. You will always hesitate. You will always sound a little bit off. Because the highway from your native language to English has a speed limit, and it's very low, the only way to get faster is to build new highways, new neural pathways, which means you have to stop using the old ones. And that, my friend, is why learning English as an adult feels like trying to run through quicksand. Your brain is literally fighting you. Not because you're stupid, because your brain is doing its job, protecting you from the discomfort of not knowing. The good news, and this is the part that made me want to jump up and dance when I learned it, is that adult brains can still change. Neuroplasticity isn't just for kids, it's for everyone. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Your brain will only build new highways if you give it a reason to. If you keep speaking English the same way, using the same crutches, avoiding the same mistakes, your brain says, see, no need for new roads. The old ones work fine. But if you force yourself to speak differently, to make new mistakes, to try sounds that feel unnatural, your brain panics and says, oh no, I tested this on myself. For 1 month, I banned myself from translating. When I didn't know a word, I couldn't look it up on my phone. I had to describe it the way Lily describes things. If I forgot the word refrigerator, I had to say the cold box where food lives. If I forgot umbrella, I said the thing you hold when rain comes down. The first week was agony. My brain screamed at me. It threw tantrums. It tried to trick me into switching to Vietnamese. But I didn't give in, and by the end of the second week, something shifted. I started finding the right words faster. Not because I had memorized them, because my brain had started building new shortcuts, new highways. Highways that went directly from thought to English, without stopping at Vietnamese first. Then I added another layer. I started mimicking the physical feeling of Lily's speech. Watch a toddler talk sometime. They don't just move their mouths. They move their whole faces. Their eyebrows go up and down. Their hands wave. Their shoulders shrug. When Lily says no, she doesn't just say it. She throws her whole body into it. And that physical engagement, it turns out, is a secret weapon. Research shows that you remember words better when you act them out, when you attach a gesture or an expression to them, because your brain doesn't store language in just one place. It stores it in your motor cortex too. So I started talking with my hands. I started making exaggerated faces. I started saying I'm tired with a full body slump. The way Lily does when she wants to avoid a nap. And you know what? It felt ridiculous. But it worked. The words stuck. Because I wasn't just learning them, I was living them. The third thing I did was the hardest, and also the most important. I stopped sleeping on my language learning. Literally. There's a fascinating study that shows you remember vocabulary better if you review it right before you go to sleep. Because your brain consolidates memories during deep sleep. So every night, for 10 minutes before bed, I would whisper to myself in English. Not study, just talk about my day, about what I was worried about what Lily had said that made me laugh. No judgment, no correction, just my voice in English right before sleep. Within 2 weeks, I started dreaming in English, not full sentences at first, just words, apple, car, go, but then, after a month, whole phrases. I dreamed that I was ordering coffee at Starbucks, and the barista understood me, and I didn't stutter. I woke up crying, happy crying, because I knew, in that moment, that my brain had finally started building those new highways. The dry cement had gotten wet again, not because I was young, because I was stubborn, because I refused to accept that adult brains can't learn, and because I had the best teacher in the world, a 5-year-old who had never read a single research paper, but knew instinctively that the only way to learn is to try, fail, try again, fail better, and never stop moving. So here's what I want you to take away from this section. Especially if you've told yourself I'm too old to learn English or my brain doesn't work that way anymore. Your brain is not broken. It's just efficient. And efficiency is not your friend when you're trying to learn something new. You have to trick your brain into inefficiency. You have to force it to struggle. You have to describe the refrigerator instead of looking up the word. You have to talk with your hands. You have to whisper to yourself before bed. You have to make 1,000 mistakes and refuse to feel ashamed of a single one. Because every mistake is a crack in the old highway. And every crack is an opportunity for a new road. In the next section, I'll tell you about the first real fight I had with my husband, the one that should have destroyed our marriage, but actually saved it, and how my terrible English became the thing that finally made us honest with each other. The first real fight with my husband. After 5 years of marriage, 3 years of silent dinners, and approximately 4,000 times saying I'm fine, when I was absolutely not fine, Tom and I finally had our first real fight. Not a disagreement, not a passive-aggressive sigh. A real, shouting, crying, I can't believe you just said that fight. And here's the part that still makes me smile when I think about it. The fight was in English. My English. The broken, imperfect, verb tenses wrong English that had once made me hide in bathrooms. And that fight saved our marriage. Let me back up. It was a Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after I started my toddler-inspired rewiring experiment. Lily was at a friend's birthday party, so the house was quiet. Tom and I were sitting on the couch, supposedly watching a movie, but I could tell something was off. He kept checking his phone. He wasn't laughing at the funny parts. And when I asked him what was wrong in my slow, careful English, he said, nothing. That word, nothing. The most dangerous word in any language, because nothing is never nothing. Nothing is usually something too big to say, or something I don't think you'll understand, or something I'm scared will start a fight. I knew this, because I had said nothing 1,000 times myself, but this time, instead of letting it go, I pushed. Tom, I said, you are not fine. Tell me. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something that hit me like a punch to the stomach. I feel like I've been doing this marriage alone for 5 years. You never tell me what you really think. You just say okay and fine and whatever you want. I don't even know who you are anymore. I froze. Because he was right. I had been so scared of saying the wrong thing in English that I had stopped saying anything real. I had become a yes machine, a nodder, a peacekeeper who kept the peace by erasing herself. And Tom, who had loved the sharp, funny, opinionated woman he met at the bakery, was married to a ghost. Something snapped inside me. Not the shame snap. The other one. The one where you've been quiet for so long that your voice comes out like a roar. You want to know who I am, I said, my voice shaking. Okay. I will tell you in my English, the bad English, the wrong English. You will listen. And then I talked. For an hour. I told him that I hated when he finished my sentences because it made me feel like a child. I told him that I was lonely at his family gatherings because his mother talked too fast and nobody repeated things for me. I told him that I was tired of being the one who always said sorry. Sorry for my accent. Sorry for my grammar. Sorry for taking too long to order coffee. I told him that I loved him, but that love wasn't enough when I felt invisible in my own home. And I made so many mistakes. I said I feel instead of I felt. I said he don't instead of he doesn't. I used the wrong prepositions, the wrong tenses, the wrong everything. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Because for the first time in 5 years, I was saying what I actually meant. Tom didn't interrupt. He didn't correct me. He didn't say it's felt, honey. He just listened. And when I finally ran out of words and started crying, he pulled me close and said, "Thank you. Thank you for finally being angry at me." I pulled back and looked at him confused. "Why are you thanking me? I just yelled at you for an hour." He smiled, and his eyes were wet too. "Because you yelled at me in English? You didn't switch to Vietnamese. You didn't give up halfway. You fought with me in my language. And that's all I ever wanted. Not perfect English. Just you fighting for us." That's when I understood something that no language class had ever taught me. Fighting in a second language is terrifying, but it's also incredibly honest. Because you don't have the vocabulary for manipulation, you don't have the fluency for passive aggression. You can't craft the perfect cutting remark when you're still searching for the word hypocrite. So you just say what's true, in the simplest, most direct way possible. And that raw honesty, the honesty of someone who doesn't have the luxury of hiding behind elegant sentences, that honesty can save a marriage. After that fight, everything changed. Tom stopped finishing my sentences. He started asking me to repeat things when he didn't understand. Instead of nodding and pretending, he learned to wait, and I learned to speak. Not perfectly, but honestly. We started having real arguments about money, about parenting, about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, and every argument was slow, clumsy, and full of mistakes. But we always ended up laughing. Because one of us would say something ridiculous like "you are making my head hot" instead of "you're making me angry." And the other would say "your head is hot. Do you need ice?" And the tension would break. The fight that should have destroyed us, the one where I finally stopped being a ghost, actually built something stronger. It built a marriage where imperfection was allowed, where mistakes were not weapons, but invitations to try again, where my broken English became not a weakness, but a kind of truth serum. I want you to think about the relationships in your life, your partner, your parents, your children, your friends. How much of what you don't say is because you're afraid of saying it wrong? How many I'm fine-s have you swallowed because the real sentence felt too hard to build? What would happen if you let yourself speak badly? If you said I feel lonely instead of I felt lonely, and the person who loves you heard the feeling, not the grammar mistake, I'll tell you what would happen. You would finally be seen, because perfect English is not a prerequisite for love. Connection is. And connection happens when you stop performing and start being real. Even if real sounds like a toddler who says goat instead of went. After our fight, Tom and I made a pact. Every night at dinner, we would each say one hard thing, something we were scared to say, something that might come out wrong, and we would listen without correcting, without fixing, without judging. Some nights, my hard thing was tiny. I didn't like the dinner you made. Some nights, it was huge. I'm scared I'll never feel like this country is my home. But I said it, in my broken English, and Tom heard me. Not the grammar. Me, that pact, my friends, did more for my English fluency than any textbook. Because I was finally using the language for its real purpose, not to pass a test, but to love and be loved. In the next section, I'll tell you about the moment my daughter laughed at me for saying sheep instead of ship, and why that laugh, instead of breaking me, finally set me free. My daughter laughed when I said sheep instead of ship. You remember the Target parking lot? Right. The sheep versus ship disaster that made me want to dissolve into the floor. Well, fast forward 2 years, and the same mistake happened again. Same word pair, same potential for humiliation. But this time, the ending was completely different, and that difference taught me more about learning English than all the research papers I had ever read. It was a Sunday morning, and Lily, now 5.5, was helping me make pancakes. I was pouring batter onto the griddle, and I wanted to tell her about a dream I had the night before. In the dream, I was on a large boat crossing the ocean, so I said, Lily, last night I dreamed I was on a big sheep. She stopped stirring the batter, she looked at me, and then she burst out laughing, not a polite giggle. A full, belly-holding, tears in her eyes, can't breathe laugh. Mommy, she shrieked. You said sheep. Like the animal? You were on a sheep. A big, fluffy sheep. Were you riding it? Was the sheep swimming? And she kept laughing, and I felt that old familiar heat rising to my face. The shame heat, the I want to disappear heat. But then something strange happened. I looked at her laughing, and I realized she wasn't laughing at me. She was laughing at the image. A grown woman riding a fluffy sheep across the ocean. That is objectively funny. And in that moment, instead of running to the bathroom or apologizing or spiraling into self-hatred, I started laughing too. Really laughing. The kind of laugh that hurts your stomach. Yes, I said, still laughing. I was on a big sheep, and the sheep was saying baa and swimming very fast. Lily laughed even harder. Tom came running from the other room to see what was so funny, and when we told him, he laughed too. The three of us stood in the kitchen, tears streaming down our faces, because Mommy had said sheep instead of ship. And then Lily, still giggling, took my hand and said, "Mommy, it's ship, S-H-I-P. Say it with me, S-H-H-H-H-I-P. So I did, S-H-H-H-H-I-P. Good, she said. Now say, I was on a ship. I was on a ship, I repeated. See, she said, easy. And Mommy, if you say sheep again, I will just imagine you riding a sheep. And that's funny. So it's okay. That was the moment I realized I had finally, truly, crossed the line that I had been trying to cross for years. Not the line to perfect pronunciation. The line to not caring. Because for the first time, I had made a classic, embarrassing English mistake in front of my biggest critic, my 5-year-old daughter, and I had not felt ashamed. I had felt connected. Humor, it turns out, is a better teacher than shame. Shame makes you want to stop talking. Humor makes you want to keep talking because the conversation is fun. And toddlers, as I had been learning for years, are naturally funny. They don't judge mistakes as failures. They judge mistakes as entertainment, as curiosity, as opportunities to laugh together. The science backs this up, by the way. Studies show that people learn languages faster when they are in a positive emotional state. Laughter releases endorphins, reduces stress, and opens up the brain's learning centers. When you're relaxed and having fun, your brain is literally more absorbent. When you're tense and afraid, your brain puts up walls. So by laughing at my sheep instead of crying about it, I had accidentally done something brilliant. I had told my brain, this is safe. This is fun. You can learn here. After the pancake incident, I started intentionally making funny mistakes. Not to be annoying. To practice not taking myself so seriously. I would say to Tom, "Can you pass me the salt?" while pointing at the pepper, and when he passed the pepper, I would pretend to be shocked. "No, I said salt. Why did you give me pepper?" And he would play along. "You said pepper. I said salt. You said salt. Oh, I heard pepper." And we would both laugh. I started using the wrong words on purpose, just to see what would happen. "Lily, please put your shoes in the refrigerator." She would look at me like I was crazy and say, "Mommy, shoes don't go in the refrigerator." And I would say, "All right. I meant the closet. Refrigerator is for food. Closet is for shoes." And she would giggle and say, "You're silly, Mommy." But here's the thing. I wasn't being silly. I was training my brain to be flexible, to not freeze up when the wrong word came out. Because the wrong word will come out. It's inevitable. The question is not whether you will make mistakes. The question is what you will do when you make them. Will you crumble? Will you apologize? Will you run away? Or will you laugh, correct yourself, and keep going? I learned something else from Lily's laugh that morning. She didn't correct me to be mean. She corrected me because she wanted to understand. The sheep versus ship confusion was genuinely confusing to her. She needed me to clarify. And once I did, the conversation continued. That's what correction is supposed to be, not a judgment, but a clarification. A way of saying, "I want to understand you better, so let me help you say it in a way that makes sense to me." When you see correction that way, it stops feeling like an attack and starts feeling like a gift. a gift of understanding. For the rest of that week, every time I made a mistake, I said thank you to whoever corrected me. Lily would say, "Mommy, it's went, not goed." And I would say, "Thank you, sweetheart." Tom would say, "It's interested in, not interested of." And I would say, "Thank you, honey." And you know what happened. People corrected me more. Not because I was making more mistakes, because I had made it safe for them to help me. When you don't react with shame, people feel comfortable offering you the words you need, and those words stick. Because they come wrapped in kindness, not criticism. I want you to try something this week. Next time you make a mistake in English, don't apologize. Don't explain. Don't spiral. Just say thank you to whoever understood you anyway, or to whoever corrected you, and then laugh. Not a fake laugh, a real one. Because the mistake is funny. You are a grown adult learning to ride a sheep across the ocean. That is hilarious. And the hilarity is not a weakness. It is proof that you are trying. That you are brave enough to be ridiculous. That you have not let the fear of being wrong stop you from opening your mouth. That, my friend, is the final secret that my toddler taught me. English is not a test. It is a game, and the only way to win the game is to play it badly, cheerfully, and often. The sheep story has become a legend in our house. Lily tells it to her friends, Tom tells it at parties, and I tell it to myself whenever I feel the shame creeping back. Because every time I remember that Sunday morning, standing in the kitchen with batter on my shirt and laughter in my throat, I remember who I really am. Not a woman who says sheep instead of ship. A woman who can laugh about it. A woman who can learn from it. A woman who, thanks to a 5-year-old, finally understands that the opposite of perfection is not failure. The opposite of perfection is connection. And connection is so much better. In the final section, I'll answer the question that brought you here. Can a toddler really be your best teacher? The answer might surprise you. Can a toddler be your best teacher? So here we are at the end of the story, and I need to answer the question that brought you here in the first place. Can a toddler really be your best teacher? Not a certified ESL instructor, not a fancy language app, not a $200 textbook, a 3-year-old who still sometimes confuses her left shoe with her right and thinks broccoli is tiny green trees. After everything I've shared with you, the Target parking lot tears, the goat humiliation, the silent dinners, the phone call at 4 years old, the shame blanket, the sheep versus ship laugh, you might be expecting me to say something like, yes, children are magical language wizards. And they are. But that's not the full answer. The real answer is both simpler and stranger. A toddler can be your best teacher not because they know more English than you do, obviously. They don't. Lily's vocabulary at 3 was maybe 500 words. Mine was thousands. But she knew something that I had forgotten, something that no amount of vocabulary can replace. She knew how to be wrong without suffering. Watch a toddler learn to walk. They fall, they get up. They fall again. They laugh sometimes, they cry sometimes, but they never, ever say, I'm just not a walker. They never decide that falling means they should stop trying. That stubborn, joyful, ridiculous persistence is the entire engine of language learning. And adults, we lose it. Somewhere between kindergarten and adulthood, we get the message that mistakes are bad, that wrong answers get red marks, that saying something incorrectly in front of others is embarrassing, shameful, something to avoid at all costs. So we stop trying. Or we try only when we're sure we're right. And that, my friend, is why so many adults study English for years and never become fluent. Not because they're bad at languages, because they're too good at being embarrassed. Lily has never been embarrassed in her life, not once. When she mispronounces a word, she just says it again. When she forgets a word, she invents one. When someone laughs at her mistake, and people do, because toddler mistakes are adorable, she laughs too. She doesn't understand that laughter could be cruel. She assumes it's shared joy, and that assumption changes everything. About 6 months ago, after the sheep incident, I asked Lily a question. I said, "Sweetheart, do you think you teach mommy English?" She was drawing a rainbow with crayons, and she didn't even look up. She just said, "No, I just talk. You listen." That's not teaching. That's just talking. And that, right there, is the deepest lesson she ever gave me. The best teacher doesn't feel like a teacher. The best teacher just lives their life in front of you, and you absorb what they do. Lily wasn't trying to teach me English. She was trying to tell me about her day, to ask for a snack, to complain that her brother took her toy. And in the process of listening to her, of repeating her, of laughing with her, I learned. Not because she lectured me, because she included me. That's the secret that no curriculum can replicate. Language is not a subject, it's a relationship. You don't learn it from a book. You learn it from people who let you be part of their world, even when your part is messy and slow and full of mistakes. So yes, a toddler can be your best teacher, but not because they know more, because they care less. Less about being correct, less about looking smart, less about the judgment of others. And that carelessness, that beautiful, innocent, fearless carelessness, is the most valuable learning tool in the universe. I want to tell you one more story before I finish. Last week, Lily turned 6. We had a small party at home, balloons, cake, the whole thing. During the party, I was talking to my mother-in-law Susan, and I said, "Lily has taught me so much about English." Susan smiled, and before she could say anything, Lily ran over and said, "Mommy, it's taught, not teached, taught." Everyone at the party heard it. Tom's dad, Tom's mom, Lily's little brother, even the neighbor who had stopped by. And you know what I did? I looked at Lily, and I said, "Thank you, sweetheart. Taught. Lily has taught me so much about English." Then I looked at Susan and continued my sentence like nothing had happened. No shame, no heat in my face, no urge to hide. Because my 6-year-old had corrected my past tense in front of a dozen people, and I was fine. More than fine. I was proud. Proud of her for knowing the right word. Proud of myself for not crumbling. Proud of the journey that had taken me from a woman who cried in a Target parking lot to a woman who could be corrected by her child and keep talking. That, my friends, is fluency. Not sounding like a native speaker, not never making mistakes, but making mistakes and staying in the conversation anyway. That night, after the party, Lily crawled into my lap. She still does that, even at 6, and she said, "Mommy, you're really good at English now." I laughed. "I am, yeah," she said. "You still say wrong words sometimes, but you don't get sad anymore. That's why you're good." And that was the moment I realized that my daughter had not just taught me English, she had taught me how to be a student again, how to be humble, how to laugh at myself, how to see every mistake not as a failure, but as a footprint, proof that I had walked somewhere new. So if you're watching this video and you're struggling with English and you feel like giving up, I want you to do something for me. Find a child, any child, your own kid, a neighbor's kid, a niece or nephew. Spend an hour with them. Watch how they talk. Watch how they make mistakes without flinching. Watch how they ask for the same word 10 times until they get it right. And then try to be like them. Just for one day, say goat and let someone correct you. Say sheep instead of ship and laugh about it. Call the pharmacy with your broken sentences and trust that you'll be understood. Because you will be understood, not by everyone, maybe, but by the people who matter, the people who love you, the people who, like my Lily, are less interested in your grammar than in what you have to say. I started this video with a question. Let me end it with an answer. Can a child be your best teacher? Yes, not because they know everything, but because they remind you that you already know how to learn. You did it when you were small. You fell, got up, fell again, and never stopped. That person is still inside you. My toddler just helped me find her again, and now I'm helping you find yours. Before you click away, I want to leave you with something my daughter said just this morning. I was making coffee, and I made the same old mistake. I said I potted the cup on the table. Lily looked up from her cereal and said, "Mommy, you've been saying that wrong for 3 years, but you know what? You never stopped trying. That's why I'm proud of you." She didn't correct the grammar. She didn't say put. She said she was proud of me for not stopping. And that, right there, is the difference between a teacher who knows everything and a teacher who changes everything. Your English will never be perfect. Neither is mine. Neither is any immigrants who didn't grow up here. But perfection was never the point. The point is the trying. The point is the laughing. The point is the little girl who taught me that mistakes are just footsteps, and footsteps mean you're moving forward. So here's my final question for you, and I want you to answer in the comments. What's one mistake you made in English this week that you didn't let stop you share it? Because when you share your sheep instead of ship moment, you give permission to everyone else to keep trying. That's how we learn, not alone. Together. If this story touched you, if it made you laugh or cry or feel a little less afraid, do one thing for me right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, because I have so many more stories to tell you about raising bilingual kids, about marriage across cultures, about the tiny, hilarious moments that teach us more than any textbook ever could. And I don't want you to miss a single one. Thank you for listening to my broken English. Thank you for staying until the end. And remember, the best teacher you'll ever have might be sitting right next to you, wearing mismatched socks, and asking for more juice. Now go make a beautiful mistake, and then keep going. That's all for today. I will make more similar videos in the future. Please subscribe to watch.